If you know next to nothing about Weezer, barely even know the band, you know one thing. It's not Scott Schreiner's social security number, or Brian Bell's favorite flavor of muffin, or Pat Wilson's plot to conquer the planet, or even the name of the musician that Rivers Cuomo compares himself to in Buddy Holly. Nope. If you know anything about Weezer, it's that nobody hates Weezer more than Weezer fans. It's nearly as big a joke online as the Virgin one. I mean, somebody should let Moses know that there are 3 more commandments. Weezer fans don't have sex, don't have friends, don't like Weezer. It may sound ridiculous to a simple-minded non-Weezer fan, but if you've actually listened to the band, it's not all that hard of a concept to grasp. Here's a soundbite from 5 different albums to help you understand.
I didn't mean to do you harm. You are my baby tonight. And I'm your daddy. Can't knock the hustle. Can't knock the hustle. When I'm playing my piano. Ooh.
That's all the same band. If all those tracks played back-to-back on the radio, you would be confused because those 5 don't belong on the same radio station. Not to say that any of them are worse, I'll say that later, but you have to admit these hardly sound alike. Each album has their own supporters who each like those albums for wildly different reasons. So different that oftentimes their reason for liking an album is another listener's reason for hating it. That's just how music works. It's subjective. No, it's not. Yes, it is! Think of the worst song you have ever heard in your life. That's somebody's favorite song. You can sit them down, talk to them for hours, use some special interrogation techniques. You will never, ever convince that person not to like that song. Yet, there is still hope for ending this seemingly endless argument before it causes the eventual destruction of Earth. It's controversial, but goddammit, it's our only shot. Take all the scores from people who hate an album, add it to the scores from the people that love it, divide it by the amount of scores, and create an average. Will everyone agree with this rating? No. Those are called outliers, and they exist mainly in the comment sections of my videos, but statistically, by using this method on a big enough pool of participants, we can form the mathematically most agreeable opinion, or an objective opinion. The second one works better in YouTube titles and t-shirts. Still, for this to work, we need as many scores as possible, and I've decided to organize these scores into 3 categories. And listen, I'll be honest with you. I've rewritten, re-recorded, and re-edited this section of the video well over 10 times. Why? Simply because it's boring. Boring to explain this shit. So boring I could not watch my own damn video. So, I'm gonna rush through it, and the alternate universe versions of you will thank me. First up, critic scores. I found them on Metacritic and albumoftheyear.com, 2 well-regarded critical aggregate websites. Then, listener scores, not to be confused with fan scores, were taken from the user review sections of those sites, as well as rateyourmusic.com, which is entirely user reviews. And finally, I took fan scores from the Weezer subreddit, specifically this post by user NDMT1225, who single-handedly saved me months of research by conducting a survey that ultimately produced accurate fan scores for each album. Can we trust this random Redditor? Yes, I looked at the data. Beyond this, we've got a few ground rules. No compilations, demos, singles, deluxe editions, or EPs. I know this must break the hearts of you very dedicated Christmas with Weezer fans, but 15 studio albums is more than enough. Also, none of my own personal opinions. This video is about aggregating as many opinions from around the web as possible in order to find the mathematically most loved Weezer album. Having all that science broken up by my bullshit would just spoil the intent of the video. I'll make a separate video about my real opinions soon enough. What I will do for now is try to explain these placements. Justify why, on average, one album is more highly regarded than another. When we get to the more negative rankings, this may come off as me just being a dick, or being biased, but trust me. Oh, speaking of, I cut this video in half. Turns out spending a full week rewriting and re-editing stuff that ultimately gets erased forever is a big time waster. So, as the title suggests, this week we're covering the better half of Weezer's discography, starting with number 7. the Green Album. It garnered a score of 70 out of 100 from critics, 67.5 from listeners, and 60.3 from fans. Its ultimate score was 65.93. At no point did this album ever leave the 7th place spot. In terms of albums, this is our high midpoint. It makes sense, honestly. If you listened to Weezer before the Green Album came out, I'd wager you hate Green. If you listened to Weezer after the Green Album came out, I'd wager Green played some part in getting you into Weezer. If I could define it in one word, it would be accessible. It's an album that's easy to love, but just as easy to hate. Mainly because Green is incredibly shallow. That's not a personal opinion, that's a fact. People who like the Green Album aren't analyzing the lyrics and trying to break down a hidden meaning. Those who like it with the pretense that it's a simple album. It's fun. That's it. There are some interesting stories behind certain tracks, but this is a 28-minute album. That's 5 minutes longer than Season's Summer, an EP. Plenty of people like the album, getting it just barely into this half of the list. But there's more than enough who dislike it to justify a mid-tier spot. Number 6, Maladroit. 71 from critics, 70.9 from listeners, and 70.5 from fans. Truly an uncontroversial album. Uncontroversial, yet still unpopular. Fans of the album share this feeling that everyone on Earth is going insane because so few people acknowledge Maladroit's existence. Its story is a great deal like a more popular Weezer album, Pinkerton. It came after an album full of radio-friendly fun that brought in an audience of mainstream listeners who did not like the grungier and more melancholy sound of the follow-up. But unlike Pinkerton, there has been no massive wave of critics returning to the album years later to give it the high score it always deserved. The world turned and left Maladroit here. Still, a small minority of dedicated fans have found the forgotten album and given it a new life, but not enough to get it in the top 5. Speaking of, number 5, Everything Will Be Alright in the End, or Illbait for short. 72 from critics, 74.8 from listeners, and 80.6 from fans. This is one of 2 times that listeners liked an album more than critics, and it's clear to see why. I mentioned earlier that Weezer has had many different faces and sounds over the years. Of these, one has been the rarest. That is classic Weezer. It's a concept that's hard to define. Many people consider these 3 albums to be classic Weezer. Or just these 2, or just this one. Regardless, for whatever reason, Illbait just hit that spot, scratched that decade-long itch, and convinced Weezer's oldest and most judgmental fans to reconsider. This album reached the number 5 slot mainly for appealing to this demographic that would have left dozens of bad reviews if not for this fact. That's not to say Illbait is a bad album or a pandering one, it still boasts plenty of innovation and weirdness outside of its classic sound, but it's a comeback album through and through. And it gave many fans something very important: hope. Number 4, OK Human. 74 from critics, 73.9 from listeners, and 81.6 from fans. OK Human came out at a time when hope was scarce. The pandemic hit in 2020, and although we're still feeling the fallout, nothing was quite like that first year. Isolation, fear, insecurity, depression, that's what defined that era. An era that paused culture. No new movies, no new episodes, no new music. Even Weezer's 75% finished upcoming album had to be put on ice. Until January of 2021. As the world started to look less scary, OK Human was released at the right place at the right time. Even before the pandemic, it was an album about isolation, fear, insecurity, and depression, and being completed during this panic definitely had an effect on the finished product. This is Weezer's other introspective masterpiece, a glance into the mind of Rivers Cuomo that the world didn't recoil at. It showed his growth as a person while still being relatable and fitting this era of human history. The only reason it's not number 1 is because it's so different. The classical piano and strings that define the sound of OK Human ultimately caused a large faction of listeners to ignore it. Some fans didn't like their favorite rock band channeling chamber pop, while certain critics and listeners couldn't take an album like this seriously from the same band that brought you Where's My Sex. On top of this, most negative reviews say the same thing. The classical sound masks mainly mediocre and cringy writing. Whether or not you agree with that is a matter of personal opinion, but the small minority that dislike the album keep it at number 4, while many people consider it a masterpiece. Number 3, The White Album. 72.5 from critics, 78.1 from listeners, 87.6 from fans. This is the other album with a higher ranking from listeners than critics, which also makes perfect sense. Coming after Illbait, it marked a different type of comeback. Eubate intentionally strived to rope in fans who had long given up on Weezer. As such, it was immensely popular among people who already identified as Weezer fans, but it struggled to find appreciation outside of fans and critics. The average Joe had no interest in alternative rock in 2014, and they sure as hell didn't in 2016. But unlike other bands from the 90s that have resigned themselves to realms outside Billboard's Hot 100, Rivers still longed for the time when Weezer was mainstream. Unlike other stories of Weezer trying to be popular, however, the White Album had the advantage of having a longtime fan of the band serving as producer. This meant that Rivers could use his tricks to create another commercially popular album, while not betraying fans. White captured the sound of classic Weezer in a way that was still appealing to newcomers. It's one of Weezer's most accessible albums, yet it still manages to be faithful to the sounds older fans expected, truly deserving of the coveted third-place spot. But no album produced after 1996 could ever dream of cracking the top two. These two albums have reached an untouchable status. They may not be your favorites, but they're the best. The question now is, which one is number 2? Number 2, Pinkerton. 91 from critics, 83.5 from listeners, and 94 from fans. This one hurts. Not everyone can like Pinkerton. In fact, a lot more people than you probably think don't. After the Blue Album's insane success, Rivers Cuomo didn't handle fame very well. He entered one of many depressions that ultimately led to an album defined by its angst, anger, depression, anxiety, loneliness, and most importantly, honesty. Pinkerton was much more a glimpse into the warped mind of Rivers Cuomo than a sequel to Blue. As such, fans and critics at the time rejected it entirely. I still get comments on my videos posted in 2022 from early fans of the band who are adamant that Pinkerton is garbage. Yet, it saw a resurgence in popularity in the early 2000s, and when the deluxe edition was released in 2010, positive reviews really started pouring in. Today, Pinkerton is considered a masterpiece by most, yet is still despised by a quiet but present minority. It wasn't designed to please everyone, making it a cult hit, but also making it impossible to beat our number 1 spot. Number 1. Christmas with Weezer. Just kidding. The Blue Album. 95 from critics, 80.9 from listeners, and 93.9 from fans. In total, it only scored 0.43% better than Pinkerton, showing that every single review from every single grouping mattered today. This was Weezer's first studio album, and to this day, their most popular. It achieved triple platinum status and was on Billboard's top album sales chart for 125 weeks, or just under 2.5 years. Yet, this result may upset you more than anything in the worst Weezer album video coming out. In fact, I ran a poll on the Weezer subreddit to try and gauge how fans would feel about this result, only to find that just over half of fans disagree with this placement. Still, I feel like any other album would have received an even lower share of votes in the yes section. You see, although many fans of Weezer love Blue, most just respect it. They can see how important this album is and appreciate it mainly as a stepping stone to better things. But Blue is more than that. Blue is the lowest common denominator. The most likely to be liked, the least likely to be disliked. Mathematically, Blue is destined to be the highest rated album because it gets the least hate. It's not depressing like Pinkerton, or poppy like Green, or modern like White, or absent of guitar like OK Human. It's vanilla. It's the default flavor you can build upon. Perhaps not likely to be anyone's favorite, but everyone likes it, and every subsequent album is in some way connected to it. There is no Weezer as we know them without Blue, and so the Blue Album is the objective best Weezer album.